Okay, so here is my other model that I have just finished doing, and let me know your thoughts. If you don't care, then I'll probably use this one. But I know that some people probably get maybe like attached or used to seeing certain VTubers, uh, like models and stuff. So if you would rather me use like keep the other one, we can definitely do that. Um, but I wanted to show this one off so then you guys can see and kind of, make your own decision. I'm gonna leave the choice up to you guys. Hey, I hope you guys are doing good today. We are going to be watching Lighthouse Food from the 1800s. I think this is going to be kind of a wild one. I actually just watched this movie not that long ago. It was it was interesting. It was an interesting one. And we're going to be watching Tasting History with Max Miller on this, one of our favorites. If you do get a chance, I'd appreciate if you can leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out a bunch. And I will have Max's video linked in my description below. So be sure to go follow him and sub to him, all that good stuff. Watch his videos. He does awesome, awesome work. Let's see what we got going on here for Lighthouse Food from the 1800s.
Lighthouse keepers were notorious for going crazy. Maybe it was the isolation, maybe it was the monotony of having to keep that light going all the time, or maybe it was their food. Their diet was pretty basic, but with a well-written recipe, even the basic ingredients that a lighthouse keeper in the late 19th century had available to them, you could make something like this Boston corn chowder using a recipe from
Ooh, that looks good.
1896. So thank you to Trey.
Who do we have behind us today? Let me know, because I have no clue. One of these days, I'm going to be able to name one. I can feel it. I can feel it. It's only a matter of time, right? Of like the 7 that I know. But yeah, I let me know if you watched The Lighthouse and let me know your thoughts because I definitely thought it was a little crazy.
Trade Coffee for sponsoring this video as I make Lighthouse Chowder, this time on Tasting History. So I stumbled across this book called Instructions to Lightkeepers from July 1881, and it was the manual given to all lighthouse keepers in the US at that time. Of course, it's filled with a lot of instructions on how to maintain the light itself, how to keep the tower whitewashed and gleaming, how to care for the lens, and all sorts of other duties that a lighthouse keeper had to perform. But near the back, I found a list of all the foods that would have been made available to the lighthouse keeper on an annual basis. Things like beef, 200 pounds, pork, 100 pounds, flour, 1 barrel, rice, 25 pounds, beans, 10 gallons, potatoes, 4 bushels, onions, 1 bushel, sugar, 50 pounds.
How many are in a bushel? I feel like I should know this, but I don't know.
Coffee, 24 pounds, and vinegar, 4 gallons. They also got butter, salt pork, a number of canned and pickled vegetables, and something called pilot bread. It's sometimes called pilot biscuits or pilot crackers, and I actually have this box of pilot bread that a viewer sent to me, and they really haven't changed since the late 1800s. Essentially, what they are is a slightly more palatable version of hardtack. They even look like it, but they are a little bit softer. I feel like there's a higher water content here. I can actually bite into it, but they are very dry. And there's also a little bit more flavor than just the flour and water version of hardtack. So with all of these different ingredients in mind, I had an idea to go through some of the old logbooks from different lighthouses at the end of the 19th century to see what they were eating and what they were doing with these ingredients. And one thing appeared a lot, and that's just different versions of soup or chowder. And
That makes sense though, especially like in their kind of work environment and it's easy and then you could probably just keep it on the stove. I would imagine or it'd be really easy to reheat. I love corn chowder though. I do love a corn chowder, like chicken corn chowder. Love that.
thing appeared a lot, and that's just different versions of soup or chowder. And so, since many lighthouses are in the Boston area, I looked to the Boston Cooking School Cookbook by Fannie Farmer for a period-appropriate recipe. And there I found a corn chowder that uses pretty much only ingredients that would have been available to a lighthouse keeper at the time. It says cut
Perfect.
pork fat in small pieces and try out. Add onion and cook 5 minutes, stirring often that the onion may not burn. Strain fat into a stew pan. Parboil potatoes 5 minutes in boiling water to cover, drain, and add potatoes to fat. Then add 2 cups of boiling water, cook until potatoes are soft, add corn and milk, then heat to boiling point. Season with salt and pepper, add butter and crackers split and soaked in enough cold milk to moisten, remove crackers, turn chowder into a tureen, and put crackers on top. Soups and chowders were very useful for a lighthouse keeper because they could make it at one point during the day, but then keep it nice and warm throughout the day and into the night while they kept that light burning. They would have to get up multiple times a night to trim the wicks, replenish the oil, and should it be raining, clean off the lens and windows, which is probably why they were provided with 24 pounds of coffee. Now,
Gosh.
I'm not maintaining a light, so I don't need 24 pounds of coffee, but I would make a pot of coffee using the coffee from today's sponsor, Trade. There's actually a funny story about coffee and lighthouses. It actually comes in the form of a warning from around 1912 to tourists in a certain area who kept going to this lighthouse keeper and asking him if there was any coffee around. He will lead you in and, in response to your inquiry, advise you, oh yes, they serve coffee here. The serving is done at a table on which a cold luncheon is spread. Then when it comes to the settling, you pay as much for 1 cup of the coffee as if you had took his regular meal. It is
That's 'cause that coffee's gold for these people. You know? Like, don't be that dense. Come on, people. Come on now.
comes to the settling, you pay as much for 1 cup of the coffee as if you had took his regular meal. It is not his fault, is his answer, that you did not eat that which was placed on the board. Travelers without number have complained of this rascality of the lightkeeper.
Maybe leave the man be. Maybe don't go be bugging him. Just let him do the thing.
Rascality indeed, especially because they said it's a cold luncheon, so you wouldn't have been able to get this wonderful corn chowder, for which you need 3 cups of sweet corn. Her recipe actually calls for 1 can of corn, which I thought, well, that doesn't seem like very much, but it turns out that when she was writing, the cans of corn were 1 pound, 4 ounces.
Pound.
So it's quite a bit more than this. It's about 3 cups. 4 to 5 medium Yukon Gold potatoes, enough to make 4 cups when peeled and cut into 1/4-inch pieces. About 3 tablespoons of fatty salt pork. If you don't have salt pork, you can just use bacon fat. It's gonna work the same for this. 1 onion diced, 1 quart or 1 liter of whole milk, 3 tablespoons or 45 grams of butter, 2 teaspoons of salt, 3/4 of a teaspoon of pepper, and 8 crackers.
This already sounds delicious. I'm already sold on it. I already want to eat this. It's making me hungry already.
Specifically, she calls for common crackers, which was a catch-all term for very plain cracker. They can still be found in New England today, though usually they're quite a bit smaller. At the time that she was writing, they were much bigger, so you'd need 8 about that size. And so I'm actually going to be using the pilot bread. They're pretty much the same, and this is something we know the lighthouse keepers had available. So first you need to scald the milk. Not scold the milk, bad milk, but scald the milk. And to do that, you add the milk to a saucepan and warm it over medium heat until it reaches about 180 degrees Fahrenheit or 82 degrees Celsius. Then set it aside and let it cool while you proceed to heat the pork fat in a skillet over medium-high heat. After a couple minutes, much of the fat should have melted into grease, and then you can add in the onions. Cook them for about 5 minutes, moving them around every so often so they don't burn. You want to cook them until they become translucent and start to brown. Once they have, carefully pour out any remaining grease into a pot. It really helps if you use a strainer. Also remove any fatty pieces that might be remaining. Then set the onions aside and add the potatoes to a small saucepan with just enough water to cover them and let them simmer for 5 minutes just to soften them up a bit. Then strain them out and add them to the pot that has the grease left from the onions, and add 2 cups or 475 milliliters of boiling water to the potatoes and set them over high heat, letting it all come to a simmer. Once the potatoes have simmered long enough that they can easily be pierced with a knife, add in the corn as well as the scalded milk and the onions. Stir everything together and let it slowly come up to a gentle boil.
Looks so good.
And while it does, we are going to soften our common crackers, which turn out not to be so common. Now, if you're using the small ones, they really don't need this softening. They're going to soften up a little bit later, but the big ones do need just a little bit of time. If you're using something like Ritz crackers or club crackers, well, don't, because they will just disintegrate. But using the larger, drier crackers, break them into good-sized pieces and add them to a bowl of cold milk, letting them soak for maybe 10 seconds, and then take them out. Once the crackers have soaked and the chowder begins to boil, add in the salt and pepper and stir them in, and then add in the butter. Once it's melted, add in the softened crackers and let them float on top while the chowder simmers for
Oh,
another 10
I didn't
minutes
know
or
that,
so.
that we were
The
putting the
crackers are
crackers in
actually
it.
going to help thicken up the chowder, and it does take about 10 or 15 minutes. So
Oh,
while it does that, let's take a
that's actually really interesting. I didn't realize the crackers were going in there. I thought, like, in the picture, he, like, put them in there, you know? So I didn't know that, and the fact that it's gonna help it thicken, that's pretty cool.
the
That's like a nice little trick.
chowder, and it does take about 10 or 15 minutes. So while it does that, let's take a look at a few interesting stories I found about the lives of lighthouse keepers.
I feel like these are gonna be terrible. These are gonna be, like, really depressing, or is this gonna be like we're gonna watch somebody's, like, descent into madness because of the solitary?
Now, the life of a lighthouse keeper could obviously vary greatly from place to place and from time to time. Like a person lighting the fires of the Lighthouse of Alexandria 2,000 years ago would have lived a very different existence than, say, Captain January in the Shirley Temple movie, or the keepers in the movie The Lighthouse, both of
Oh god, yeah, this was yeah, if anyone's living this life, it's a rough life. It is probably not something, that's gonna be easy to do. Although this movie was really good, but I found it just a little bit odd, but it definitely it wasn't bad.
which take place in New England in the late 19th century. And it's more that period and that location that interests me for the purpose of this video. But even then, the life could be quite varied depending on where your lighthouse was. Like, was it just at the end of a little peninsula so you could go into town every day? Or was it more like the Boston Light, which is out on an island? This lighthouse, first built in 1716, was situated on Little Brewster Island in Boston Harbor. And while a relatively short distance from one of the largest cities in the American colonies, rough weather and constant work made it so the lighthouse keeper would often have to stay on the island for weeks or months at a time between trips back to the mainland. And that was actually the life of most lighthouse keepers, regardless of how far they were, because even if you could make it back to the mainland, you couldn't stay there for very long because you always had to be back at night to tend that light. Because for the longest time, the only mandate was, don't let that light go out when it is dark. And it
Well, yeah, because that's like super important, you know, like you can't let that go for sure. But I wonder, did they try to sleep for most of the day and then everybody was just up at night, or like maybe you slept in shifts at night?
The only mandate was, don't let that light go out when it is dark. And it may seem a simple mandate, but it was a laborious one and an incredibly important one, not only for the safety of a country's mariners, but also for the survival of its commerce. In early America, for example, all trade with Europe, which was the vast majority of trade, was dependent on keeping those lighthouses going. It was such an important job that for many years, the appointments of lighthouse keepers were actually made by the president. For instance, it was
Oh,
President George
wow.
Washington who appointed Henry Long to be keeper of the Cape Fear Lighthouse in North Carolina. Washington approved a $300 salary, which was quite a bit less than the requested $350 salary, but he, or whoever was actually writing the appointment, said that basically the lighthouse keeper was getting a great bonus in the fact that he would have use of a good house well situated for taking fish and piloting. Piloting here could refer to ferrying people around the harbor or any other manner of odd jobs a person who owns a boat could be hired to do. But the problem was lighthouse keeping kind of takes up all of your time.
Yeah, I would imagine, especially back then, you probably got like a pretty full plate of stuff you got to get done. I don't know if these are necessarily perks. I don't think these are perks of the job.
The problem was lighthouse keeping kind of takes up all of your time. So we didn't have a lot of time for piloting. Because not only are you taking care of the light itself, but it must be remembered that the lighthouse keepers are their own cooks, house and laundry maids, so that over and above professional work, domestic duties have also to be performed. Not that he really had anything to cook, because he quickly found himself nearly starving on this island, and so he wrote a well-worded third-person complaint letter, saying, "All these advantages are now entirely lost to your petitioner by his living on an island where he has not the privilege of raising stock of any kind, nor even vegetables."
Well, I don't think he wants to be doing that anyway if he's got to take care of everything else. I think this is like the last thing he wants to do.
Island where he has not the privilege of raising stock of any
Like, here, take care of this lighthouse, stay up all night, do all this other stuff you got to do. Oh, and by the way, you can like raise livestock and be a farmer. Yeah, I'm sure I'm sure they'd be stoked about this.
kind, nor even vegetables. Fish and oysters are at too great a distance from the island for him to attempt to procure. Eventually, his salary was raised to $333.33, which seems to have been enough at least to keep him from complaining anymore. Now, he's not the only one that found lighthouse keeping a rather poorly paying job. The lighthouse keeper in the Boston Light, John Hayes, he had to basically run the place like an Airbnb. He would let passing mariners
Oh,
stay for the
man.
night for a few pennies, and it was only in 1718 when he complained that letting strangers sleep in the only thing keeping ships from running aground outside of Boston was probably not a great idea.
True. I would 100% agree with him. Like just letting strangers sleep in a place where kind of important, I would say, so that boats aren't crashing, probably wouldn't be the safest. I mean, I'm sure majority of the time it was fine, but it only takes like that one, right?
In 1718, when he complained that letting strangers sleep in the only thing keeping ships from running aground outside of Boston was probably not a great idea, that Massachusetts agreed to give him a raise. Now, Hayes lived alone in his lighthouse, which was not uncommon, but it was also not uncommon for a lighthouse keeper to bring his wife and his family to live with him, which was the case of Henry Long, who was the one complaining about starving on Cape Fear. He lived there with his wife and children until one of the husbands of one of his children shot him accidentally during a hunting trip, and he
Oh my gosh. Well, that kind of sucks. Okay. Well, I guess that makes it a little bit better. So if you can bring your family, then yeah, sure. I think you can probably make it all work. Like everybody can kind of help out, but I still feel like this is like a lot of responsibility and a lot of work to be doing and to want to be farming and all kinds of other things.
of one of his children shot him accidentally during a hunting trip, and he died, leaving his wife alone
Gosh.
at the lighthouse. And so you couldn't let the light go out, so she had to take up the job. Rain or
Oh
shine, this
man.
meant she was going up 6 flights of stairs multiple times a night with buckets of oil to make sure that that light kept gleaming. It would have been a difficult task for anyone, and some other names were put forward as people who could take over for her should she not be up to the job. But a few months in, she was doing a great job, actually. Even though there had been several major storms, she was good to go. So someone wrote her an appointment and sent it to the desk of then
Aw.
President Thomas Jefferson, who replied, "The appointment of a woman to office is an innovation for which the public is not prepared, nor am I."
Oof. Damn. Yo, she was getting it done because her husband got accidentally shot and now he's gone and she picked up the slack. Sometimes you just gotta give credit where credit's due, bro. Let's go.
To office is an innovation for which the public is not prepared, nor am I. Now, despite Jefferson's refusal to appoint her as official lighthouse keeper, there were several unofficial lighthouse keepers who were female at the time, like
Oh,
Hannah
okay.
Thomas, who was the keeper of the Plymouth Lighthouse in Massachusetts from 1776 all the way to 1786.
I don't know why, but lighthouses look kind of creepy or ominous, I guess maybe is the better word for it. A lot of times they do look really pretty and they are kind of cool, but at the same time it's kind of like how many bodies are stacked underneath there or something. Maybe I've just seen too many movies.
But it wasn't until 1826 that President John Quincy Adams signed off on the first federally appointed female lighthouse keeper. But
Oh,
even
nice.
then, many of the female lighthouse keepers got the job because their husbands died doing it.
That makes sense. There's a lot of wives that probably just picked up the slack for him. Good for them.
And this was the case of Mary Ryan. She and her husband ran Calumet Lighthouse, which is right outside of Chicago. And in 1873, he died, leaving the work to her. Well, she didn't really want the job, but she had been told that the place was going to shut down because mariners kept complaining that they thought that the lighthouse was actually Chicago, and so they would go there only to find out that they were 12 miles from where they were supposed to be. But if you read her logs, turns out it wasn't closing. December 25th, 1873. I was supposed to have been informed when this light would be discontinued. Not a vessel since the 15th of November, and nothing to light for. And this is such a dreary place to be all alone in. April 7th, 1874. So dull. This place is killing me.
Oh my
Wind
gosh.
blowing violently. May 2nd, 1874. Nothing but gloom without and within. October 1st, 1880. The news is that the light will soon go from me forever.
Oh my God, this is such a see. This is more of what what I thought it was going to be like for some of these logs.
1880. The news is that the light will soon go from me forever. November 1st, 1880. This is all gloom and darkness.
Oh my God.
For 7 years.
For 7 years. 7 years. Can you imagine? I cannot. I feel my heart like breaks for this woman because this like sucks. Even if this was a man stuck here by himself too, like I don't even care. Like man or a woman, you are in this position, like that sucks and that's terrible.
1880. This is all gloom and darkness. For 7 years, she stayed alone at that lighthouse until finally someone came to take over the job.
It only took 7 years. But like, God damn.
Now, Mary Ryan's depression is not uncommon for lighthouse keepers. If you read the logs of this period from lighthouse keepers, there's a lot of melancholy, and it's probably due to the isolation and the monotony of the job. And it was a lot of work. In April of 1835, the first official list of lighthouse keeper duties from the government came out here in the US, and the workload was a lot for one person. They were essentially responsible for the complete upkeep of a 40 to 60 foot tower, often on a cliff above the sea. And if you've ever been near the sea, just keeping a fence painted is a full-time job, let alone keeping a huge tower gleaming white with whitewash. Also, everything seemed to always be breaking, and they had to fix everything constantly. It was...
I would imagine so, because I mean, that's a lot. I mean, you're right off in the ocean. That's a lot of salt. Well, salt water that's, just going to be destroying everything.
Seemed to always be breaking, and they had to fix everything constantly. It was a full-time job. And it wasn't just a full-time day job, but it was also a part-time night job. You are to light the lamps every evening at sunsetting and keep them continually burning bright and clear till sun rising. In order to maintain the greatest degree of light during the night, the wicks are to be trimmed every 4 hours, taking care that they are exactly even on the top. So you're working all day, cooking, cleaning, and making sure the place doesn't just fall down, and then at night, you're not able to get more than a few hours of sleep.
Yeah, this seems like such a workload for one person. Like if one person was there by themselves and this is everything you had to be doing, and then you essentially get like 4-hour naps at a time. That sucks.
Down, and then at night, you're not able to get more than a few hours of sleep at any one time. It was grueling. Or, at least, that's how it was supposed to be. But in practice, it seems that it didn't always go down like that. In fact, in a report to the Lighthouse Commission in 1851, the author lays out what lighthouse keepers were supposed to be doing, including the fact that they had to leave their beds at night to examine and trim their lamps, a sacrifice of personal comfort which few of them are willing to make. It is therefore no uncommon occurrence to see a light gradually disappear between 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So to address this problem of disappearing lights early in the morning, he suggested paying the lighthouse keepers more money, as the current salary will not command the services of intelligent men, such as are required to do justice to a valuable and costly apparatus when such is entrusted to them. They also started having assistants for lone lighthouse keepers.
That's probably a smart idea too. Like, I don't, it seems stupid that you would expect one person to be doing all this.
And this was the setup that you see in the movie.
Or maybe like four people, depending, because what he said it could be weeks or months that they're there for. So maybe you send like a crew of four.
The Lighthouse with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. And the extra pair of hands did make it so they got the work done, but the added company doesn't seem to have stopped them from going insane. Because lighthouse keepers were notorious for going insane. Maybe it was the monotony, maybe it was the isolation, or maybe it was the mercury. See, in the
It was the mercury, right? That's true.
latter half of the 19th century, the Fresnel lens had become the standard in most lighthouses. And they were massive lenses that could not only amplify light, but focus it into that classic lighthouse beam. The issue was that they were incredibly heavy, and so to keep it turning easily, sometimes they had mechanical things that would do so, but many times it was sitting in a pool of mercury. And that pool of mercury needed to be ever so often cleaned out by the lighthouse keepers, probably with bare hands and yeah. So,
Oh, yeah. That might make you go a little crazy.
it's not known that that's why many of them went crazy, but it's a pretty good guess.
Yes.
In fact, the
Yeah.
phrase mad as a hatter is often attributed to the same issue, as mercury was used in the production of felt for hats in the 18th and 19th century. So it could just as easily be mad as a lighthouse keeper. Frankly, nothing about being a lighthouse keeper seems particularly good for your health. Mercury, loneliness, dried and canned foods for months.
Yeah, it sounds like one of the most like depressing jobs you can have. Loneliness, lots of work, probably like shitty weather and mercury poisoning. It doesn't sound like they got paid enough.
Good for your health. Mercury, loneliness, dried and canned foods for months on end. I grew up thinking that life of a lighthouse keeper was like that of Captain January in the Shirley Temple movie, with lots of singing and dancing. I was wrong. But as bleak as the existence
Come to think of it, I don't know what kind of impression I had of lighthouse keepers. I think I just thought they were like maybe like sailors or something. I don't know. I'm trying to think back when I was young or like a kid of what I thought lighthouse keepers were, but I don't really think I had any sort of impression or perspective on it.
may seem, at least every once in a while, you could count on having a bowl of nice warm corn chowder. So after about 10 minutes of simmering, the recipe says to remove the crackers, something which sounds very easy, but in reality is a bit of a pain in the butt.
Yeah,
and
I bet.
frankly, I'm not even sure why you have to do this, because as soon as then you serve the chowder, she says to put the
'em back
crackers
in.
back on top. And here we are, Boston corn chowder from the 1890s.
I think
Every
this
time I
looks
say
good.
chowder, I can't help but think of that Simpsons episode where Mayor Quimby's nephew mocks the French waiter for how he says chowder.
Chowder! Chowder! It's chowder! Say it right!
But regardless of how you say it, let's give it a try. Get a little bit of everything in there. It's definitely not as thick as a modern chowder would be,
Okay.
but it is chunkier, meaning like it has more things in it, which I like.
Looks good though.
That is
Yep.
so good.
It's a success.
There is so much flavor in there. It's kind of sweet, but in a pleasant way. Like, it's not like dessert sweet or anything, but you're getting that sweet corn in there, but it's actually more potato heavy. Like, the flavor is more potato than corn.
Oh, you're speaking my language. More potato. Yep. I like it already. I like where this is going.
But it's actually more potato heavy. Like, the flavor is more potato than corn. But I like it because there is so much flavor, and yet it doesn't have the heavy consistency that a lot of chowders today have, because it's not as thick. Like, the milk or cream hasn't been thickened quite as much.
That's fair.
So I could probably eat more than I would a bowl of regular chowder. Oh, but man, that is good.
This seems like cozy food too. I'm down with it.
Man, that is good. It's the onions. The onions give it that sweetness because basically we kind of caramelize them when we cook them. I want to try some of this now quite soggy pilot bread.
That's probably good too.
It's totally absorbed all the flavor, which makes sense. That's really good. Actually, I really like the soggy pilot bread. Man, that's one of the better soups that I've made here on the channel. That's one of the better soups that I've made here in my life, actually.
That's saying a lot. That is probably saying a lot. I might have to try this come winter time. Add it to the list of things I gotta make.
Delicious. Now, if you've made it this far in the video, I wanted to share with you a little treat in the form of a few pictures of my favorite lighthouse keeper ever. He was a French lighthouse keeper around the turn of the 20th century, and his name was Louis Coulon. He was a...
Is that a cat in his beard? He gets brownie points for that. This looks like a very iconic picture.
Housekeeper around the turn of the 20th century, and his name was Louis Coulon. He was a lover of cats and the then record holder of the longest beard at about 3.35 meters. I don't know anything else about him except that he was French and that he had quite an impressive, if kind of nasty looking beard.
It is kind of gross looking, and this is a little icky looking.
That he was French and that he had quite an impressive, if kind of...
But it is impressive that he grew a beard this long, and apparently the cat really likes it in there, so, you know, do your thing.
Kind of nasty looking beard. Gonna keep mine fairly trim, but I thought he was interesting. Anyway, make this chowder. It's freaking delicious, and I'll see you next time on Tasting History.
I thought this one was great. I'm gonna have to make this. Let me know if you guys make this and what you think of it, because it doesn't seem like it's too complicated, and it just looks so like cozy and hearty. It looks good. I'm looking forward to making this. Also, be sure to go and like and subscribe to Tasting History with Max Miller. He does such an awesome job. I really enjoy watching his videos. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate you guys being here. That's going to do it for me. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.